This is WPwatercooler's Dev Branch episode number 2. If you don't know, we launched this thing a month ago, and we're doing this as a once a month, get super geeky in WordPress, super geeky in web development, and just kind of talking about this stuff. And yeah, this is episode number 2. Today we're going to be talking about building a static website with WordPress. And all of that. But before we go around the room and get everyone introduced, I want to let you know about ServerPress, makers of desktop server. They make local WordPress development easy. Go check them out over at serverpress.com, where you can learn how you could start up your website locally on your computer. And then after that, use their other product called WP Site Sync to sync it over to your live website and go get all that set up. So feel free to go check them out over at serverpress.com. Thank you for helping us out. We really appreciate it.
One more quick shout out is Mark Benzacane will be speaking at the OC WordPress meetup about WP Site Sync on March 23rd.
Ooh, and they just launched Beaver Builder syncing, which was pretty, or not Beaver Builder syncing. What was it? It was WooCommerce syncing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Nice.
So let's go around the room real quick, get everyone to introduced. Let's see here. Whoa, Jacob, what are you doing here, man?
Hey,
my crosstown rival. How's it going?
What's going on? Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob. I am a developer at Zeek Interactive. So good to be here talking static site generators in WordPress.
Good to have you. Brianna, how about you? Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Brianna Privet. I'm a tech enthusiast and a woman who codes.
Awesome. Good to have you. Steve, how about you?
I am Steve Zenkit. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress meetup.
Mr. Cosper, how about you?
Y'all know who it is. It's Jason Cosper, a.k.a. Fat Mullenweg, in the building. Just happy to talk some dev topics today, really dig into the meat of stuff. What about you, Jason Tucker?
Throwing it over to you, Jason.
Well, the weather is going really great today. So I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me at Jason Tucker on Twitter. And my website is jasontucker.blog. I do this show as well as another show called WP Blab. We just recorded that show today. We had some really cool topics. We actually had Jason Cosper, another Jason Coleman on the show today, and we talked about kind of starting up your own web development company and how you fund it and how you do all those sorts of things, the businessy side of open source. So go take a look at that. We recorded that earlier today at 9 a.m. Pacific, but it's always recorded live. It's always available on YouTube's and the internets and everything, and it's also a podcast too, so feel free to go take a look at that. So let's talk about static website development. I think all of us started out doing static websites by just like writing some HTML and then hitting save and then uploading it via an FTP client, and the site was super fast. Everything ran off of tables, and it was just amazing back then.
You had an FTP client, luxury.
Well, I was gonna say it was super fast for 56.
Look, man, I had to use VI. All right, I used VI to write all my stuff.
That is way before my time. I had no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, come on, man. Yeah. But yeah, that's the start of static sites. Now you have all this like ultra dynamic stuff where you have you have CMSs like WordPress that are cranking out your content and everything, all being fully dynamically generated. And then we started getting into caching those things, and now we're at the point where it's like, okay, we can cache it, we can do all this stuff. How do we make like a full static version of that site so it loads fast, it's very performant, and all of that?
What's interesting about this move is that Movable Type built their CMS to do that, in like 2001, 2002. And the entire market was like, this is so bogus. Every time we compile, everything's stopped.
So true.
This is wrong. And I think it's ultimately, probably why we are here, because we met through WordPress instead of Movable Type.
I had 3 clients I converted from Movable Type over to WordPress back in the day, because that's what everybody did. Everybody moved off of Movable Type onto WordPress.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, like Perl was hard and PHP was so much easier.
Totally. But I mean, what's old is new again. And part of the reason for this movement is not necessarily because it's simply the right thing to do, right? Right? That's not really what motivates everybody to do the right thing all the time, right? Your clients or your customers or your users are experiencing slowness, and so it is the right thing to do. But now Google will actually ding you for having a slow site, and that's why I think is a big part of this. Jason's got movable type up on the screen.
Dude, 7.0 is available. Like, you could do this right now. Even has its own API.
I think one of the big drivers is because Google changed their algorithm over the past couple of years to really factor in your page speed and site speed.
I'm still curious though why we aren't, and I say this as an enthusiast, you know, we are now so many layers of abstraction from those original HTML sites where you could view source and really see what was going on. And it feels like we keep pushing it further and further. So now we have a CMS, we have deployment, we have a UI framework of some kind that's usually JavaScript based. We're rendering everything, you know, repeatedly to get these fast static sites.
Well, I'm going to date myself here as well. I mean, I've made fun over the years of people that still use Dreamweaver, right? And we often mention tools like FrontPage in the past, but I think Dreamweaver now is poised to make a comeback because it's doing what we're talking about. You're rendering a static site, right? It's a tool that renders a static site, and all you're uploading then is HTML, right? So you've got these very fast sites that are created in Dreamweaver.
I think the tools are a bit more advanced now because it's not just rendering one page, you're programmatically rendering potentially 100, if not thousands of pages.
Well, and that was always the benefit of Dreamweaver, right? It was the first tool that I can remember where you could sort of create a template and then have your content sitting separately. So you did have kind of a local database where you were managing stuff, and then it would render out all the pages for you. So that was a very early site generator, let's call it.
Yeah, didn't it make those like SAV files or whatever, or lock files? That's what it was, those lock files. So you couldn't make changes to any of the files, because if it saw a lock file, it's like you're not allowed to touch this. Which is, I think, what what kind of changes things with having a generator actually generate the site, is that you're still able to use a dynamic backend to kind of build all the content and do all the things that you need to, and then tell it to deploy it, and it kind of pushes out all of that static content. So you still have that multi-user environment, right? And now you can still kind of put that content out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, I mean, we talk a lot internally at Zeek about Jamstack, and we're starting to talk to a lot of our clients about it. But Jacob will correct me if I'm wrong here, but essentially Jamstack is using sort of the tools as they're sort of meant to be, so that you're using kind of the best in class for each tool, right? And WordPress is a great CMS, right? It's a phenomenal CMS. I'm just not sure that it's great on delivering the front end of a website, and you're out of the box, right? And so people have sort of leaned on WordPress to do everything, right? Not just be a great CMS, but be a great web server, right? Dynamic web server. And it is slow, right? Especially if you start adding a whole bunch of plugins, it's just slow. It's that we've come up with caching and servers and having servers with multiple workers and managed WordPress hosting. All this stuff that has been created over the past 5 and 10 years is really just masking the problem that a PHP MySQL system creates by default, right? And so if you have a system that's calling a database just to render pages, and you use it out of the box, and the site starts to get traffic, it's going to be slow. It's not unique to WordPress, right? It's just going to be slow.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, for someone like me, I mean, I think I have motivations on two fronts to go into, Steve said Jamstack, which stands for JavaScript APIs and Markup. It's becoming a really popular term, a really popular architectural style, right? It's carving out the data layer and leaving WordPress or your CMS to manage the data, and your UI is managed by a completely different entity, whether that be, Gatsby or something like that, right? But like the motivation for me in terms of using like a Jamstack is, one, on two fronts. Site performance is going to be super fast. Not only that, security, right? Because theoretically your site is pre-built, right? All your pages, all your post pages, whatever your architecture is on your application, that's built ahead of time, right? At build time, not at runtime. You don't have to worry about potential security issues with your database or with PHP or anything like that. It's just a bunch of HTML files sitting in a CDN somewhere, right?
Well, there's nothing to hack. There's nothing to hack anymore.
Yeah,
because there is no database.
There's like cross-site scripting with like JavaScript stuff, but it's a much lower barrier in terms of security, I think, when you're in that kind of environment. The other thing too, in terms of like why I like it outside of performance and security, is this thing called DX, developer experience. I like working in something like React and Gatsby. That's just a more enjoyable experience for me. But again, that's just the developer side of things. A client may not really care about something like that.
Well, to be honest, the client usually doesn't care what it is that we're building the thing on, as long as it looks pretty and sells the things it needs to sell.
They just want to know if you can bump it up a few pixels, right?
Yeah. Is that lighthouse speed going to go up as a result?
Well, and ultimately, what we're saying, what they really do care about is results, right? And so, is my site ranking, right? Are my customers happy with the experience? Is my bounce rate coming down? Are they leaving my site because it doesn't load fast? Those things are all results of what we're talking about. That's what they care about. They may not know how we got there, but that is what they care about.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about static site generators in terms of the options out there, right? Something like Gatsby, which is a React-based static site generator, which allows you to bring your own data from anywhere, whether that's in Google Sheets or in WordPress or in other CMSs like Sanity or whatever. You bring your data into it, but it was built from the ground up to have performance and speed in mind, right? It's built to be a fast UI, a fast experience. So you bring your data, in this case WordPress. But you choose a static site generator that has performance kind of top of mind, and that's kind of why I like Gatsby as well.
So when you're working in an enterprise context, have you found that moving your developer workflow to more Jamstack, has that introduced more points of failure or more points of miscommunication? Has it made things take longer from a development perspective?
I think it's a paradigm shift, not only like for content creators, but for developers as well. For instance, normally in WordPress land, sometimes we reach out for a WordPress plugin to solve a problem, right? Because they've already solved that problem, and maybe there just needs to be some configuration and customizations. Now, if you have a certain problem, a certain feature that you're trying to build, the WordPress plugin may not be a solution. Now it's a matter of, well, can we do that on the JavaScript side of things? Do we have to build our own? Is there a JavaScript library that solves that problem? So there's that component of it, of paradigm shift, of kind of, instead of reaching out for WordPress plugins, now you've got to kind of figure out how to do it on your own or reach out for other resources. I think too, in terms of how that changes for clients, is the managing the expectations, how Steve likes to say a lot, right? Like clients are used to, or content creators are used to clicking on publish and having that post page, whatever, available right away.
Right, like instant gratification.
Yeah. So now there's a delay, if you will, because the site's got to rebuild. Now there are solutions that are in the pipeline for stuff like that, like incremental builds, previews, and stuff like that, that'll make the actual build faster. I know Gatsby is working really hard on, building out things like incremental builds. So if you only change one thing, instead of the site having to rebuild and go get all the images and all the posts and pages, it may just get that one thing or get things from cache as a result, right? So now the rebuild time will be much, much faster.
And one of the efforts that they're making, you should kind of look at, is Gatsby Cloud. I put it in the show notes, but Gatsby Cloud is making some headway here. I mean, essentially what you're looking at is the more pages and posts you have, the longer it's going to take to build the site. That's just how it is in this new system. But from a client standpoint, what I'm finding I have to sort of inform clients of is sure, it may be a larger build on the front end, right? So the initial phases may be larger, but it's less maintenance, right? Because there are a lot less things to maintain down the road, right? We're not having to look at security issues. We don't have to look at, is the server running? We have less that we have to, consistently visually test on a regular basis because the site's not usually down in a static environment. And so there's just less to go wrong on a regular basis. So,
and you can push more towards the edge. I know that a lot of people will put their static sites, especially their Jamstack sites, on CDNs that allow you to serve your stuff from closer to the actual users instead of having everyone go to a centralized server, in Virginia or San Francisco or something like that. You can actually get servers close to the people.
I just want to say, just to comment on what Cosper just said, our two hosting partners that we use in the managed WordPress space are Liquid Web and WP Engine. But for the Zeek site now, we're hosting on Netlify, right? So you mentioned the CDN. Netlify not only has the CDN, but it also does the Gatsby builds for us. So all that's handled at Netlify.
I'm a big fan of Netlify. I really enjoy using it. The barrier to entry is very low.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have to worry. I didn't have the time to try to figure out and configure CDN and SSL and builds. Like, I just needed something to get up and running quick and not have to think about it. And Netlify, checked off on all those marks and just let us get up and running super fast.
Isn't their first tier free?
Free. Yeah. So we're on their free. We're on their free.
How much does that tier cost?
How much does the free tier cost?
Yeah. let me get my calculator. Hang on a second. Oh, it's $0.
So WordPress has a habit. I'll let Jacob go because.
No. I mean, I think, since we're talking kind of some of these tools that, we're using, another thing that I definitely wanted to give shout out to is the WP GraphQL plugin that Jason Ball writes and maintains. So in terms of headless WordPress, right, the out-of-the-box solution to getting your data is REST API, which is fine. It works. But if you're not familiar with GraphQL, definitely go look that up. But it's more of a graph versus REST. And so in terms of increasing or lowering your build times, the GraphQL solution helps with that because there are fewer round trips. There is less data coming across the wire because you're only getting data that you're asking for, kind of thing, right? So definitely give WP GraphQL and all of its extensions like this WP GraphQL ACF extension. So we've got ACF running on the Zeek site that we expose to our GraphQL schema that Gatsby is picking up on a given particular post as well, which is really, really neat. I know they have WP GraphQL WooCommerce, WP GraphQL Gutenberg. So they're doing a lot of work with this GraphQL plugin, and it's really, really good. Something you should definitely check out.
And that's nice as well, since ACF can occasionally not be very performant when dealing with a dynamic site, especially a large. I'm trying to be kind.
And I'm a huge ACF fan. We use it on every single one of our sites, but there's no occasional to it.
Right.
Friend of the show, sorry.
ACF can be heavy.
Yeah.
Tucker?
So friend of the show, JD asks, can GraphQL be a benefit to any basic site?
I think, I mean, I am a fan of GraphQL for many reasons. That's a longer conversation, I think, but high level, it gives me the ability to make queries and get data back that I only want and in the shape that I expect it in. So in that context, it's really, really cool, and it lowers the amount of round trips. And what I mean by that, if I try to get a post, right, and a post has maybe an author ID, and now I need to get the author name, right, and the author's title, for instance, I've got to make another request with that author ID. Now, if I want to get the categories, I've got to make another request because the post only exposes maybe category IDs, right? So now we're talking about 3 different round trips, whereas in GraphQL, I in the same request can say, give me the post, the title, the author's name, the featured thumb URL, the category names, go. And then it brings it all back, and that's only what it brings back. So high level, that's a huge reason in terms of a front-end developer, why I like working with GraphQL as opposed to REST.
But I think what he was asking, what JD may have been asking, is if he's just running a basic WordPress site, not going to Jamstack. I mean, there's not a lot of reason for GraphQL. I mean, you're using this as a key component for getting headless WordPress over to a Jamstack environment. Is that correct?
Yeah. If you're not using a static site generator and you're not in a Jamstack architecture, you don't need GraphQL. Just like you don't need REST to run your WordPress site.
Right. So a friend of the show, Jason Tucker, which is also myself, asks, can you still do the 5-minute install?
The guy looks so familiar.
I know, right? Look at him. Jeez.
Can you do the 5-minute install? Is that what you asked?
Yeah. Can you still do the 5-minute install? And the reason why I ask is, we had recently talks about the fact that now there are companies that are building this stuff out. Whoa, I just made myself really big. Being able to do this sort of thing. So, for instance, you have $6.5 million that went to Strategic that says that Stratic, where the fact that now you can essentially pay somebody to kind of host these things and build this stuff out, which kind of goes along the same lines of the different hosting solutions like we were talking about with StackBit or any of these other things. Being able to kind of jump into this and be able to use this. There's also another one that Jason was sharing with us, which is called Shifter. But just having that serverless, static hosting of a WordPress site. Does this still make it so we can do a 5-minute install and be able to use it?
I'm gonna challenge you and ask if the 5-minute install was ever true. Could you ever do a true 5-minute install?
Well, it takes 5 minutes to remove all of the themes that they install on the website from the web hosting company.
But okay. Aside from a managed WordPress situation, right? If you are doing this completely yourself, you got to set up a server, you're setting up a space, you're putting the files in place, you're doing all that stuff. Is that truly a 5-minute install?
It never is.
Okay.
It never is. And that's actually how I got into headless WordPress, was trying to figure out if it could ever be, and seeing which services were taking extra time, which decisions were being made in that process that maybe could be eliminated. And this is Dev Branch. So we're talking to people who are probably going to be really into, hey, how can I spin this up? And who cares if it takes 5 minutes? It's Friday night, and I've got 2 liters of Mountain Dew. And
I mean, we can spin up an instance and have WordPress set up in about half an hour, right? Now, I think the 5-minute install is true if the files are already set up and you're filling out the form. That's a 5-second install at that point, right? Is all that is, to just give the site a name and put in your email address, because it's going to assign you a password. If that's what they're talking about, then that's less than 5 minutes. But truly, I don't think WordPress has ever been a 5-minute install.
It's all marketing, baby.
I know. I get it.
Well, maybe it's a 6-minute install now that you use one of these setups.
It's 5 plus.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Jason, what are you asking? Are you saying is it a 5-minute install to set up a whole Jamstack environment? Or is it a 5-minute install to set up WordPress, or what are you asking?
Well, I'm going back to what Matt Mullenweg usually says at these events, and he always brings up 5-minute install at some point in his thing. It's when you're playing the drinking game, that one shows up on there, and you got to take your drink. But when that happens, I still think, I'm like, is it really still 5 minutes? And if it is 5 minutes, or if it ever was 5 minutes, what happens with all of this additional layers of stuff that we're now adding in here to be able to generate a static website? For instance, I could have set up a 5-minute install of movable type, because it's just a Perl script that you run and you go, boom, done. Perl script's out there. It spit out my, all of my different pages, and I'm done. But does that, can you still get that same sort of thing with WordPress when your WordPress itself wasn't a 5-minute install? So now you have additional layers of complexion that need to be added in there.
I think the 5-minute install was true when WordPress was just a blogging engine, when it was pick a theme, pick a couple of plugins to do maybe some additional functionality, but basically just pick your theme, Kubrick, at the time, and they've just never changed it. And you can have any theme you want as long as it's Kubrick or classic, and then you're good. But I mean, at this point, yeah, it's changed and shifted as we've added more plugins, more themes, more everything else. I think that, like I said, at this point, that's just marketing.
Right.
Something that's kind of interesting to me, and I know we only have a few minutes left, is when it comes to static websites, you are throwing away some of the dynamic functionality that comes with WordPress. And especially with WordPress, WordPress likes to follow Kaplan's law of the instrument. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's give a small boy a hammer and he'll find everything he encounters needs pounding. So everything looks like a nail.
Right.
So, I need e-commerce. I can use WordPress for that. I need a forum. I can use WordPress for that. I need a social network. I can use WordPress for that. So what about these WooCommerce sites? And I know that there are some Jamstack stuff that you can do with WooCommerce, but in the case of some of this dynamic stuff on static sites, like what are the solutions there?
Yeah, I know. Well, go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to name a couple of solutions since we're running short on time. I mean, yes, WooCommerce goes away in a Jamstack environment. You might want to look at something like BigCommerce or Commerce Layer. Both are good Jamstack e-commerce solutions.
I'd disagree with that. I wouldn't say WooCommerce. I wouldn't say WooCommerce goes away. WooCommerce is still an option. You can use WooCommerce as your data layer, but you've got to build the UI now, right? Because when you install WooCommerce, you get two parts. You get the data, the infrastructure of WooCommerce and order handling and all that stuff on the admin UI, but you also get the front end of add to cart page, checkout, right? Account page. You now have to rebuild that entire UI yourself.
And thank you for clarifying. I was really thinking about the front end, right? So yes, WooCommerce can manage the data, right? But I was thinking of the front end piece of it, which is what you just said, the add, the cart, the checkout, all that stuff. Since you're not in a dynamic environment, it's gone, right? Yep. And so BigCommerce and Commerce Layer can kind of replace that by using some embeds, right, from their system rather than coming from your system.
And that's as long as you're okay. That's as long as you're okay with having a third party do that stuff for you.
Absolutely. And in Jamstack, everything's a SaaS or a third party, right? It's just you have to switch your thinking a little bit about using the best tools for the job. Forms is another one. That's an easy one that sort of goes away because you don't have that dynamic environment anymore, right? So Gravity Form, at least the front end of Gravity Forms, is not going to work anymore in a Jamstack environment. So we use Netlify Forms. But Jacob, what's that other form company that you talked about? FormSpree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Form handling is a big deal, right? So it's a question that you need to a solution you need to come up with if you decide to go Jamstack is, okay, we do form handling. How are we going to do that now? Because WordPress is not going to do that anymore. Although there are some extensions for GraphQL to do GraphQL Gravity Forms with the mutations, but that's still something that you need to build and solve.
Sounds good. It sounds like it sounds like, to me personally, it sounds like we've done a really good job of overcomplicating WordPress. Which means I would love to have this conversation again, especially if we can get into some of the nitty-gritty pieces of doing this. I know a couple of us came in here with like, I really want to talk about this part of it, or I really want to talk about that part of it. But for like a 30-minute show, it makes it so difficult to talk about very high level or very low, high level and low level stuff here. So
yeah, I mean, we moved the Zeek site over to a headless environment or a Jamstack environment. We can always talk about some of the issues that we're facing once we kind of get them all documented, and how we approach them, how we solve those specific things, and some of the things that are still outstanding.
Cool. Well, hey, I want to say thank you very much for all of you for coming and hanging out with us, as well as the folks that are in the chat room that were providing us with some questions and comments and that sort of thing. If you want to continue those conversations and everything, you can go over to our website at WPwatercooler.com and click on there to find the subscription buttons, as well as leaving comments on any of the places that you're watching this. We stream this stuff live on YouTube as well as on multiple Facebook pages and on Twitter. So if you see any of these things and you thought it was an interesting thing, you may want to share it with somebody. Click the little share button. We'd appreciate that. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can click the little bell so you can get notified when we're actually doing these things live. And lastly, if you don't want to watch us live, I totally get it. If you only want to watch us, I totally get it too. But you can listen to us as a podcast. So you can go over to WPwatercooler.com/subscribe, where you can subscribe to that. One last thing, I do want to let you know that if you are interested in doing any sponsorships with us, you can definitely do that. You can go over to WPwatercooler.com/sponsor. And kind of get all those things going there. We really appreciate it. And we want to make sure that people know about the different products and services that you guys are going and doing over there. Talk to y'all later. You have a good one. Bye-bye.